Hello, I'm Hannah and welcome to my podcast, Don't Tell Me to Relax, the antidote to unhelpful fertility information. I'm a fertility acupuncturist and educator, and this podcast aims to empower and inform you about your menstrual cycle and your fertility. It's basically all that information you didn't get in sex education at school, with the aim of helping you improve your reproductive health and increase your chances of conception. Hello, welcome back. We are at episode 6. So we have really gone through the cycle and now we are going to be talking about tracking, because I think pretty much in every single episode we have talked about tracking, and we've talked about why it's brilliant, why we love it, why we encourage everybody to do it. So we are giving it its own special episode because we believe it's worthy of one. Katy, tell us, do you track? Tell us your history of track. Do you track? Have you always tracked? When did you get into tracking? Share with us your tracking experiences.
Yeah, so for many, many years, I just used an app and just literally put in when my period was. And that was what I did for a long, long time. Then got into fertility awareness. And now I'm a big fan of tracking everything. And so I track my cervical mucus and my basal body temperature. I'm not currently tracking cervical position, but there's another thing that you can track. And it just gives you such a massive insight as to what's going on with your cycle and the things like all the things that I can do to support myself. Like, as I've mentioned in other episodes, luteal phase issues is something that I've definitely had historical issues with. So it really helps me to keep an eye on like when I'm ovulating, when my period's coming, like what am I doing cycle to cycle that's like changing things, and just keeping a track of what I'm doing throughout my cycle, so then that way you can look back and be like, okay, those things really work for me, I'm going to keep doing that. I really go on and off. Well, I don't go on and off tracking. I always track my cycle in that I always know about my period, and I always try and track my ovulation. But actually, interestingly, now I am perimenopausal. And I used to be able to do it very clearly with cervical mucus because I always got really clear cervical mucus signs. So I knew roughly when ovulation was. Obviously, I'm not trying to conceive, but I knew that I was ovulating, and I knew when I was ovulating, and now I can't work it out. And really?
So, because it's all gone a bit, to shit, basically.
Oh, God.
So I was thinking I'm going to start BBT charting because I think that will give me information about whether I have or haven't ovulated. So, for example, at the moment, I'm premenstrual. But I'm on day 31 and I am not sure whether I will get a period or not because I'm not 100% convinced whether I ovulated or not. And I was thinking, if I'd have done my BBT chart, I would know and I'd have that information. So I wouldn't be sat here thinking, am I going to get my period any day now or not? So that is my resolution for my next cycle, is to start tracking, because I think it can be really, really helpful information when you're perimenopausal and your body stops ovulating every single month. So that is what we're going to talk about. It's bloody brilliant.
Love it.
So shall we start with cervical mucus?
My favourite thing in the world. Oh, it's crazy. Like 2 years ago, I'd have been like, what? And I'm obsessed with it now. So cervical mucus. I'd love to know how many times we've said it across this podcast, but it is such a easy way to understand where you are in your cycle. The method that I teach people is just like a wiping method, so you don't have to like internally check or anything, and you're just checking what's on the paper. Is the paper dry? Is there something you can pick up and finger test? And if there is something, or like if you get a slippery sensation when you're wiping, if it's like a slip and slide and there's something you can pick up and finger test, that's like your fertile mucus. So there's loads of ways you can record that. So like you could just be doing it on pen and paper or recording it in an app somehow. And that's just going to give you a real insight as to, am I in my fertile window? So your fertile window is the run up to ovulation. And that's what cervical mucus helps us to understand. So cervical mucus tells us ovulation is approaching. And then your cervical mucus will dry up once you have ovulated. So I think sometimes people I've often heard clients say to me like, oh, so I've got cervical mucus, so that means I'm ovulating. And it's like, not quite. Like, yes, it means you want to be trying if you want to try and conceive when you have your cervical mucus, because sperm can stay alive inside of your cervical mucus for up to 5 days. So you kind of want to have it, sperm sitting in situ, ready to go. So it is the time that you want to be trying, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're ovulating that moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you know what I've just realized is we talked about progesterone in the last episode, but what we didn't talk about was the difference between cervical mucus in the first half of your menstrual cycle. So like cervical mucus that's made under the influence of estrogen versus cervical mucus made under the influence of progesterone, which is, we can talk about it here because again, it's a really good tracking tool, isn't it? Because there is a difference. And so when you know what the difference is, you can at the very least be able to work out whether you're in the follicular phase of your menstrual cycle or the luteal phase. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the non-fertile mucus, or the mucus that you get in the second half of your menstrual cycle, and why and how it's different?
So let's just go into some biology. So your cervical mucus is made in your cervical crypts, and these can make different types of mucus depending on what hormone is around. So in the first part of the cycle, estrogen is that dominant hormone, and this is when it makes that stretchy, slippery, clear, egg white-like mucus, and that's the fertile mucus. After you've ovulated, your cervical mucus should dry up, and under the influence of progesterone, those cervical crypts are going to make something called gestrogenic mucus. That's the word. And how could I forget? So it makes this gestrogenic mucus, which basically forms a plug, and it stops sperm coming through. So this is why this is like the infertile part of your cycle. So if you're getting used to doing this wiping method to check your cervical mucus, after you've ovulated, when you wipe, you're going to feel dry. There might be something shiny on the toilet paper that you can kind of see. You can't pick it up or finger test it. There's maybe something on the toilet paper, but it's not anything like mucus that you can pick up and finger test. It's going to feel quite like a dry sensation when you're wiping. So that's what you might see in that second half of your cycle. Or some people get like a much more tacky, sticky, creamy mucus in the second half, but that's often another indicator of low progesterone. If you're seeing some kind of mucus that you can essentially pick up and have a play with, then that is often a sign of low progesterone as well. So yeah, should have mentioned that in the last episode, but there's another fun fact for you.
Yeah, because that G-type mucus should stay in the cervix, because it literally, like you said, it forms the plug, doesn't it? And it's sort of held in place by progesterone. So if your progesterone levels are dropping, it can kind of like, some of it can release away, which is why you might see it. And it's also what a lot of people see in just before their period comes. So often you might get discharge just before your period comes, and sometimes if you don't know your cycle, you don't know what it is, people are like, what, am I ovulating? I thought I was about to get my period. And it's not ovulation mucus. It's like thicker, sort of more sticky, as you said, mucus that's actually falling away with the drop of your hormones.
Got a great comparison.
I'll bring it to the table.
I'm going to ruin this for a lot of people. You know, like the really thick Nivea?
Yes.
Kind of like that. So sorry, I've just ruined Nivea forever for you. But like that kind of like really thick texture is often what a lot of people, at least that's how I've like explained it to clients, and they seem to understand that.
And it's a good indicator, isn't it? Again, if you're using cervical mucus as a tracking tool, you know, knowing the different types and knowing why you might be getting them at different stages of your cycle. So, you know, if you see the Nivea-like cervical mucus, that your progesterone levels are dropping and that your period is due imminently. So, so, you know, in some ways, I often say to people, if BBT charting is stressing you out, then, and OPKs is stressing you out, then, you know, simply tracking your cervical mucus is enough to know that you are potentially fertile or not potentially fertile. And that whole kind of run up to ovulation, you get cervical mucus, you've ovulated, and so your cervical mucus dries up, as you said, so it stops. So if you notice that switch, then you know that you have actually ovulated that cycle. So again, the information is there. It's just knowing where to look for it and when to look for it and what it means.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's body literacy, isn't it? And that's what we're big advocates for, is you understanding what's going on with your body and being able to interpret that in a way that you understand what's happening with your cycle.
Yes. Yeah. It's really good stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about basal body temperature charting. So basal body temperature charting is good in that, unlike, cervical mucus, it is possible to produce cervical mucus and still not ovulate. That can happen. So especially if you've got polycystic ovaries, it's very common to get cervical mucus and then not ovulate and then get cervical mucus again. And it's often lots of people we work with are like, I'm not sure whether that was ovulation or that was ovulation, because you're getting these peaks of estrogen and this LH, but it doesn't necessarily always mean that the egg has been released. Whereas when you BBT chart, you get confirmation that you have ovulated, and you get confirmation because you will get this change in temperature. So I'm just going to go right back to the beginning. So when you basal body temperature chart, you need to be taking your temperature before you get out of bed in the morning. So you need to get an electronic thermometer, and you need to wake up, and before you've got out of bed, before you've done anything, you literally take it from the side of your bedside table, pop it in your mouth, wait till it's giving you the reading, and you record the reading down. And what you will hopefully notice is that in the first half of your menstrual cycle, so in the follicular phase, so between your period and between ovulating, you'll notice that your temperatures are somewhere in the region of about 97 degrees Fahrenheit or 36.1 degrees centigrade, and 97.5 degrees Fahrenheit, 36.4 degrees centigrade. And I'm just going to do a little kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a caveat here. Yeah, caveat here, in that it's not exact, and different people have different ideas of what the temperatures should be. But roughly speaking, it's got to be above 36, and that's 36.1, 36.2 is roughly where it's going to be above in that follicular phase. And it obviously moves up and down slightly over that phase, but that's roughly where it should be. And then once you've ovulated, so you've ovulated, you've released the egg, the follicle has become the corpus luteum, it's producing the progesterone. Progesterone has a thermogenic, I hope I said that right, effect on the body, in that it warms the body up. And it's not like, I used to think of it like, it's a massive difference. It's like, summer, winter, but it's not. It's like 0.2 degree is the amount that your core body temperature has to shift. But you will notice this shift. So what you get is you get a rise by at least 0.2 in your temperatures, and then these temperatures stay high because your body's produced progesterone, it's warmed you up, and the progesterone stays in your body for a number of days. So I think it's 3 temperatures, isn't it? 3 high temperatures to confirm ovulation has happened. So the thing with BBT charting is it can't predict ovulation. Yeah, but it is probably one of the easiest ways to confirm it, because how many people are very concerned, have I not ovulated? It's, you're trying to conceive. It's really important to feel confident that you have ovulated, because then you know whether there is a chance of pregnancy that cycle or not. So, we recommend it when you've got concerns about ovulation. But again, I'm just going to say that it can be really stressful, because you've got to be taking your temperature every single day at pretty much the same time to get a good sort of comparison across the chart. And it often takes 2 or 3 cycles to get good amounts of information. You can't really do one and use that as like, well, that's how all my cycles are. Because as you hopefully will now know, if you didn't know it before, that your cycle changes every single month, or it can change every single month. So it's important to look at the data over time. And it's also important to not really obsess about what the temperatures mean in a sort of single day time, because it can be influenced by illness, whether you've had a drink the night before. It can be influenced by getting up in the night to go for a wee. All of these things can really impact
medications, like travel.
Yeah. So it's not an exact science, but if you use it as a sort of overriding way to view your cycle, see whether you're ovulating, it can be really helpful. It can also really give you good information about progesterone, because if you get that really lovely temperature rise, if your temperatures stay high and then they come down nicely, that's good solid levels of progesterone. But if you notice, as Katy said, that you're getting a zigzag or you're getting sudden drops, then this could be a sign that your progesterone is struggling, and it's therefore something to address and something to look at. So anything else about BBT charting that I've missed, Katy? Anything you need to add?
I don't think anything that you've missed. I think, like just what you're saying about people finding it stressful, I think something to sort of remember is like you're looking for like an overall kind of trend across the cycle. Like, yes, it takes 3 temperatures to like confirm ovulation, but even if you miss 1 or 2 temperatures throughout your cycle, mostly like you'll still be able to see that thermal shift. Like, obviously get as many as you can, but I've had clients coming to me be like freaking out because they've missed like a day or 2 over the whole cycle. I'm like, it's fine. Like, often there's enough information to kind of work out what's going on. And I think that's probably everything people need to know to get started, definitely.
And also, I think, again, if you, just another couple of advantages of BBT charting is that, it can confirm ovulation, it can give you information about your progesterone levels. It can also make sure that, we were talking in one of our episodes about the luteal phase and how many days this luteal phase is. And a really good way of confirming you've got a good number of days is by knowing exactly when you ovulated, because then obviously you can count. If you're not sure when you ovulated, then you're not sure exactly how many days are in your luteal phase, so you can't 100% confirm
really
whether
good point.
it's sufficient or not. So it does give you good information for that. And
also,
that
was how I confirmed my incredibly short luteal phase, was the number of high temperatures. Massive information for me, and I'm sure any other clients that have experienced something similar.
Yes, because interestingly, isn't it, you could have a 26-day cycle and you could think, oh, well, that's okay, that's a 26-day cycle. But if you're really tracking and knowing your ovulation and you realize, oh shit, I've actually ovulated on day 19.
This was me. This was exactly me.
Yeah,
I made a reel about it. Whereas like, I've got a 27-day cycle, like whatever, it's fine. It's like, you ovulated on day 20 and got a period 7 days later. Like that's not
not a normal cycle,
by
is it?
a long way. No, like if I'd ovulated on day, I guess this is a good thing to say. If I'd ovulated on day 20, which was what was happening in that cycle, I shouldn't have got my period until like day 32, 33, and I got it on 27. Like that's the kind of shifts that like are possible to make all your ovulation shifts earlier, but I was able to confirm that through BBT. Yes, the long and the short of that story.
Yeah, and it also really amplifies why you need to track the details of your period. So, of your cycle. So it's not enough to be able to say, my period starts on, I don't know, the 2nd of February and it comes on the 28th of February. So it's a 27-day cycle and that's okay, because you are missing the intricacies of things that could be happening. So just tracking the day that your period starts is not enough to assume you've got a good cycle or that your cycle is healthy.
I completely agree.
So
I think that's the mistake that so many of us make until you know otherwise. Like, I've definitely been guilty of that for many, many years. And then, you get the understanding of what's happening with ovulation. And then you're like, my app's not maybe right.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to go on and talk about apps, because this is the danger, isn't it? If you're inputting your data off the day 1 of your cycle and that's the only information that you're inputting, then it's very easy to actually be getting the wrong information out of the app. So
absolutely,
we are going to talk about that in a minute. But one more thing that I want to talk about from a BBT perspective is that you can also look for thyroid issues. So, if you are finding that your temperatures are low, so if they're below 36 degrees centigrade, then you've got to be thinking, well, what's happening? Why is their core body temperature so low? And is there something going on with your thyroid as well, which is obviously a really important thing to address for general health, but also especially if you're trying to conceive. And, you know, like all these things, it's got to be looked at in relation to what else is happening in your life. So, you know, with the thyroid thing, you know, maybe a BBT chart isn't enough, although it would definitely highlight it. But you've got to be looking at, is the person feeling cold? Are they feeling tired? Have they got hair problems? You know, is their hair falling out? Are they feeling like they're putting on weight? You know, there's lots of other symptoms that, if you work with someone like myself or Katy, we will be asking you all those symptoms, and we'll be putting all that information together, and we'll be using all that information to make a really good diagnosis and then a really good treatment plan. So, you know, we always talk about tracking in relation to everything else that's going on in life, not just kind of like in isolation, because that's how you get the most out of it. Shall we move on to apps? Because as we just mentioned it.
Yeah, before we do though, should we just talk about cervical position very briefly?
Oh, yes. Go for it.
So cervical position is another thing that you can check to see where you are in your cycle, because where your cervix sits in your body and the texture of it changes again under the influence of different hormones. So when estrogen is high, your cervix, it literally moves higher up the vaginal canal. It feels more softer and open. And so one way people often compare it to is if you were to if you put your lips together and then feel your lips, it's going to feel more like that. Whereas in times where you are not fertile, so after ovulation, it's going to feel much lower down. So it does involve internal checking. So when you're placing your fingers inside your vagina, in times where you're infertile, or like in times of you're not in fertility. Wow, really jumbling my words today. But it's going to feel much lower. When you're not potentially fertile. It's going to feel much lower in the vaginal canal, and it's harder, and it feels much more closed. So the cervix literally opens and closes depending on the times of fertility and times of your cycle. So when you're not fertile, it's closed to like not let sperm through, and it's going to feel much more like the tip of your nose. So you've kind of got a bit of cartilage going on at the bit of end of your nose, so it's going to feel a bit harder. So that's like a good comparison. So great time to check your cervical position would be when you're having a shower. You're already naked, presumably your hands are clean. It's a good time to check, and like try and check it if you're going to do it for one full cycle, so you get used to kind of the different changes. It's one of those things that might feel like nothing's changing, and then suddenly it feels very different. So just getting used to how it feels for you, and it just needs to be checked once a day. So that's something else that you can check in terms of tracking and add that into your information.
Great, that's really helpful. Thank you. And what about apps? Well, what do we think of apps, Katy?
I'm a big fan of them, provided people are putting in their own information. Yeah. So like I use an app when I'm teaching fertility awareness clients, and I love this app. It's called Read Your Body. But it uses no algorithms. So a lot of apps are sort of reliant on algorithms and sort of predicting when they think you're fertile, which may not be when you're ovulating, as we were sort of explaining earlier, of like maybe you're ovulating far later than your app's telling you. And if you're not putting in that information, then like your app's kind of useless. Particularly if you're using an app to try and conceive or avoid conceiving, like you need to be inputting additional data and understanding that as well. Mixed opinions on apps.
And what about like the femtech in terms of things like OvuSense, the Ava bracelet? Like we see quite a lot of people using them in clinic, because I guess they're kind of a bit less stressful than taking your BBT every day, and that this is like, so OvuSense you wear internally, Ava bracelet and Temp Drop you wear externally. So I would say that OvuSense is probably the most effective in terms of...
I've heard it's a really reliable one,
but obviously you've got to put it in every night, so
that's one that you put inside your vagina, and it so takes your temperature in an internal way. So like, whereas the external ones, so like the arm bracelets, so like Temp Drop, that's like a band that wraps around your arm, and it takes your temperature that way.
And I guess you know, obvious sense in some ways takes away the stress because you're not having to wake up at the same time. You don't have to really think about it. But obviously you have got to insert it every single night. So that is something. But I guess the Ava bracelet temp drops you just wear all the time.
Yeah. So you just wear that, like you put it on before you go to bed and just wear it like that. So like they can be really good. And like you say, if people are finding taking their BBT stressful, then that can be a really good alternative to see that thermal shift happening, because that's what we're looking for to confirm ovulation. But I think just a thing to point out is that it is a bit different to taking your temperature like first thing in the morning. So your temperature, if you're doing it like with an oral thermometer, so popping it in your mouth in the morning, taking your temperature that way, that is like your resting metabolic temperature. So it's a bit different to how a lot of the kind of femtech stuff works, which is where they're taking an average of your temperature throughout the night and then giving you a reading at the end or in the morning. So it's a slightly different type of temperature. So what I've seen with clients is often, particularly things like temp drop, the armbands. I haven't seen a lot of OvuSense charts myself personally, but definitely with temp drop, often the temperatures seem to be lower compared to if you were taking it orally. So that's just something to keep an eye on, in that you don't get that same sort of like diagnostic element of being like, is there a thyroid issue when you're using something like temp drop? So great if you're just looking to confirm ovulation with it, but not necessarily going to get that same information of like, do I need to be looking at my thyroid? Should I go and get a test? Like, it's maybe not the best way to screen for that issue.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen many charts with it, I have to say, but I know that the Apple Watch have just brought out a new,
I've heard this.
Is also doing it now, isn't there? And there's the new, what's the ring called?
Aura ring.
Yeah, the new Aura ring. I think that is kind of looking also at your temperature changes through the month. So I guess the thing about them is it's that they're non-invasive, they're not stressful, you know, and it's going to give you some information. But I think relying on it as diagnostics, I'm not sure you get that level of detail. But I've not seen it enough to be able to know that. So it'd be interesting to hear what people think. And you know, any kind of tracking is better than no tracking.
100%, definitely. And like, just for anyone's reassurance, because like I know some of the femtech stuff, like it can get pricey pretty quickly. I just use to take my temperature like an Amazon £5 thermometer, and like that can do the trick as well. So different things for different people, depending on your like wants, how stressful you find it. Like there's lots of different ways you can do it. And I think that's an important thing to know. Like there are different ways to approach this from all sorts of different angles.
Yeah. And exactly that. And the idea of this is supposed to be empowering, not stressful.
Yes,
so,
totally.
You know, if you're finding it like another thing to do in your life and it's not helpful, then just don't do it.
Yeah. And like there's lots of fertility awareness methods that are like mucus only, like they don't use temperature. And you, like we were saying when we were explaining mucus, you can get so much just from that. So if you are finding like you are just freaking out and stressing about your temperatures, drop them for a few cycles and you can always pick it up another time. Absolutely.
And just to do a little plug, we have got a BBT chart temperature downloadable.
It's a lovely chart, that.
With lovely pictures and colours on. So if you want to use an old-fashioned, like $4.99 thermometer from Amazon, as Katy said, and a free downloadable chart, then, you know, we've got that for you. So and, you know, accessible to everybody. Katy, do you just want to talk again, just to give us a plug for your fertility awareness, because this really fits into it, because this is what you're teaching people, isn't it? It's about ways to track, how to do it, how to incorporate it into your life without it being stressful, and what it means. In fact, I've just said it all. I'm sorry.
Thanks for the plug. Love it. Yeah. So that's literally it. I literally teach you how to do all of this and to really understand what's going on, because I think For some people, like doing this without some support or guidance can be a bit overwhelming. There's a lot of information there. So we would work together and I take you through this process, and our appointments are quite like jammed packed at the beginning of the program, and then they spread out more and more because there's a lot of learning to do at the beginning of this. But once you've got it, you've got these tools for life, and you can use it for different things. So maybe you want to try and conceive at this point in your life, so you're using it to understand that. Then once you go through and have your baby, you can use it to help you understand where you are postpartum. And then as a method of birth control, if you want to like not have another baby for a little while, then you can use it for that, like different things. And like we said, all the diagnostic stuff, like you can understand so much about your health just through your menstrual cycle. I think we've talked on here before about your menstrual cycle is like a vital sign. Like if there's things that are a bit off kilter in there, then that can give us an indicator of how we want to look after our body and what things we want to get in place to get us feeling our best. So there's so much, it's such empowering work. Like I love teaching people this stuff because it's just like, you see these moments where it just clicks for them and they're like, oh my God, I completely understand this. And then like they're telling everyone about it, because it is just like, I think once you get into this stuff, as we are here, like we're like, it's amazing. So
yeah, it really is. It really is. Okay, well, thank you very much. And all the information will be in the show notes along with the BBT charts. I'll try and put up a link to the thermometer as well that we recommend, because I recommend one. And we, send us your feedback. Let us know how you're getting on. Let us know.
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
Because, we want to hear what's happening for you and how this is for you and what your experiences of it are. So please do get in touch, because we always like to hear from people. And I hope you have found that helpful. So thank you, as always, Katy. And I'll see you next week.
Lovely. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you have learned something helpful about your reproductive health and your fertility. If you would like to find out more information, then please come and join us in our free community on Facebook. We have tons of resources, access to our webinars, we do live Q&As, and it's a chance to connect with other people who are trying to conceive. The link to register is in our show notes, and we hope to see you there.